All right, let's jump straight into it. Today, we're exploring a deeply fascinating journey towards self-awareness and inner emotional stability. We're looking at a concept drawn from astrology and psychology, the emotional architecture of material stability. Now, think about how we normally view our finances and our emotions. We usually stick them in totally separate boxes, right? Logic goes in the money box, feelings go in the emotional box. But what if those boxes are actually made of the exact same material? What if the way you build your material life is just completely intertwined with your deepest emotional needs? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack in today's explainer, and I am so excited to guide you through this.
So, does your bank account dictate your mood? I know it's a bold question, but be honest with yourself for a second here. For a lot of us, life is essentially this quiet, ongoing search for emotional safety. And that safety, well, it's deeply tied to material and relational stability. And look, it's not just about greed or wanting luxury, not at all. It's about a profound emotional dependence on financial security. When your bank balance dips, it doesn't just feel like a logistical problem. It feels like a literal existential threat to your emotional well-being. Your daily moods are basically rising and falling with those numbers on a screen.
Which brings us to Section 1, the architecture of stability, the moon in the second house. To truly wrap our heads around this, we need to look at a specific intersection where the mind is actually shaped by comfort.
Think of material security kind of like building a stable home foundation. In astrology, the second house represents your wealth, your personal values, speech, family, and your fundamental sense of stability. It's the foundation. But when the moon is placed here, it becomes the architect. And since the moon governs your emotions, your mind, your sensitivity, daily habits, and deepest inner needs, well, the materials used to build your material security become purely emotional. When the moon sits right here in the second house, the domains of wealth and family just merge completely with the realm of deep inner emotional needs.
And this brings us to this really profound concept called emotional architecture. Simply put, it's a personality structure where emotions and material security are deeply and inextricably connected. So the absolute crucial takeaway here is that for individuals with this placement, their mind is not separate from their material comfort. It's directly shaped by it. You literally can't untangle the two. If their material world is chaotic, you better believe their emotional world is chaotic too. Their whole sense of self is anchored to the stability of their physical and relational environment. Let's move to Section 2, when money equals mood, the financial emotional connection. So what actually happens in daily life when your emotional dependence on financial security is overwhelmingly strong?
Well, out in the real world, this dynamic plays out in some very specific ways. First off, financial decisions are often guided by feelings rather than pure logic. So, for example, a sudden drop in mood might trigger an impulsive retail therapy purchase just to feel, a fleeting sense of control. And because of this, you might actually see fluctuating income or spending patterns. Those gains and losses aren't always just about the market. They are intimately tied to emotional choices or changing life circumstances. And lastly, while there's this really strong need for stability in personal values, those exact values might actually shift depending on the person's current emotional state. It's a constant ebb and flow. You can see exactly how the internal becomes external right here on this table. When stress hits, the reflex is to seek comfort, like reaching for food or material pleasures. Conversely, abstract emotional insecurity instantly translates into very real financial anxiety. To help manage this kind of financial stress, I want to give you 3 actionable steps to track your triggers daily. Number 1. Pause for a mandatory 24 hours before making any non-essential purchase. 2. Quickly log your mood right before you hit buy. And 3. Practice a simple grounding habit, like deep breathing, to really separate the emotion from the financial action.
All right, on to Section 3, caregivers and emotional roots, where the pattern begins. Because to truly understand these coping mechanisms, we have to trace them all the way back to their absolute origin.
There's this great quote: "A deep attachment to family, especially mother or early caregivers, shapes emotional identity and values." What's super important to grasp here is that our earliest caregivers lay the literal foundation for our adult material values. Think about it. When we're young, our caregivers equal survival. For someone with this specific emotional architecture, that bond is so incredibly deep that the caregiver's approach to safety, food, and money becomes permanently wired into their own emotional identity.
Basically, early family bonds create a lasting blueprint for emotional safety. This means the way a person defines financial stability as an adult was more than likely inherited directly from their mother or early family environment. If your childhood environment equated food with love or money with safety, those exact same childhood habits will absolutely shape your adult spending patterns and your emotional reactions to wealth. The past is, quite literally, funding the present.
Let's pivot a bit to Section 4, Careers of Care and Connection Outlets for Expression. Because this deep emotional sensitivity isn't just a source of financial anxiety, it actually manifests as some pretty incredible professional talent.
This kind of sensitivity pushes individuals toward very specific professional paths: care and nourishment, hospitality, emotional connection with others, and persuasive communication. Because these folks are so deeply attuned to comfort and emotional needs, they naturally gravitate toward, and absolutely excel in, careers that require genuine emotional connection. They have this profound talent for providing nourishment and hospitality, essentially creating the exact kind of safety for others that they so deeply crave for themselves.
And this extends right down to the way they communicate. There's a natural softness in their speech. Their voice itself becomes a tool for care, making their communication exceptionally gentle, persuasive, and emotionally expressive. They know exactly how to speak to a person's emotional core, which makes them incredibly effective in any role that requires building trust and providing comfort. They don't just talk, they truly connect.
Which brings us to our final section, Section 5, Maturing into Emotional Intelligence, the Journey to Self-Awareness. Because remember, this isn't a static placement. It is a full-on evolutionary path.
Let's look at a really clear example of finding balance over time. Imagine someone who, in their early years, completely panicked over every single bank withdrawal, hoarding resources because their emotional insecurity reflected as severe financial anxiety. Fast forward to their middle years, they've built a stable income, but they still feel their personal values fluctuating with their moods. But then, in their later years, they transition into true emotional intelligence. They do this by adding daily habits for emotional regulation, things like morning journaling, mindful meditation, and intentionally separating their self-worth from their net worth. They finally realize that true safety, it's an inside job.
Now, this whole journey towards self-awareness takes on unique flavors depending on what specific planets are sharing that second house with the moon. For instance, the moon combined with Jupiter might bring a really philosophical approach to wealth, while Venus heightens the desire for luxurious, comforting surroundings. But think about the others. The moon with the sun anchors these needs to ego and visibility. Mercury links financial safety to intellectual pursuits and communication. And nodes like Rahu or Ketu, they can create intense obsessions or, conversely, profound detachments regarding money. Every single placement dictates exactly how these deep emotional needs are expressed and ultimately mastered.
So I want to leave you with a thought-provoking question. Are you building your stability from external wealth or from deep inner emotional intelligence? As we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to reflect on your own foundation. Whether you resonate completely with this astrological architecture or maybe you just see fragments of it in your own life, ask yourself where your true security actually comes from. Are your moods held hostage by your material world? Are you doing the inner work to become your own anchor? Thank you so much for joining me on this journey today. Keep exploring, keep learning, and I will catch you in the next one.